Greetings, it is I, David Stewart. Don't mind the sheen of sweat on the giant dense forehead. I've been out exercising, but I still wanted to make this particular video. Let's talk about the evidence of your senses. Should you believe the evidence of your senses? This is a little bit of a follow-up to the Mandela effect video, but not really, because it could stand completely independent of that. Most of you are going to agree with my conclusions on this and my reasoning, but it's good to break things down to their sort of conceptual level and test how we think about things and why it's important to objectify reality and how we go about objectifying reality and what it means to really think about the evidence of our senses. I really like making videos like the Mandela effect video, partly because they're fun. They make me think about stuff. I like exploring a lot of the ideas that explain it beyond, the very simple skeptic idea that people don't remember things correctly. I find that fun. And what's really cool is that also brings people into the channel who hate me or maybe just have a really, really different point of view than I do, which is great because that tests your methodology, it tests your way of thinking, and, subjects your ideas to tests. And when you subject your ideas to tests, then you know whether you're really doing it, like whether you're really interacting with reality. So it's a really, really good experience. So thank you for suggesting that, and that was been fun to make that. Of course, this video can really stand independently. Most of you are going to agree with my conclusions, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't watch. It means that I like to take the time to break things down to their conceptual level, really think about how they work, and why it's important to objectify reality, and how we go about objectifying reality, and what reality is, and those sorts of things, and really how our senses relate to that. So let me get to the point. Should you trust the evidence of your senses? The short answer is yes, but obviously that's not going to do for a video. You trust the evidence of your senses every day to do pretty much everything in your life. You trust the evidence of your senses when you're out driving on the freeway and a motorcyclist pulls in front of you. You don't stop and contemplate it as like, is this mere shadows on the cave wall? Oh, he's dead. I crashed into him. He's dead. No, you don't do that. You react appropriately to navigate your environment. Obviously, it would be very, very not beneficial, let's say, for any sort of ancestor of ours to question whether his senses reflected reality as a bear attacked him or something like that. So your senses and the whole mode of interacting with the world is really important, and you should be able to trust it. However, we know that there are many circumstances where you should not trust your senses. Here's a really, really easy one, because if there's people who say, no, you should always trust your senses. What about a magic show? A magic show is presenting to you things that are designed to fool your senses. That's the fun of magic. And I actually really like magic. When I lived in Vegas, I used to love to go see magic shows, especially I'd go see Penn and Teller, and they always amazed me. And what was really gratifying for me, I love being fooled, first of all, because that means there's a puzzle someone's created that I can't solve. And that's kind of cool to me. It's just, I like it. And other times I feel really, really gratified because I think I figured out the trick. Like I remember this trick with that Teller was doing where he was throwing these coins into a fish tank, and these goldfish were popping out of the coins, and it looked really cool. And I started thinking, I'm like, how is he doing this? That's always the question with the trick. Like, how are they going to pull this off? And my mind starts coming up with different ways. And what I kind of figured out sort of a little bit of a solution, because he was using a hexagonal tank. And because it's a hexagonal tank, the angles that you're looking at it, you're not going to perceive the depth of the tank properly, which means that he could have put a mirror at the back of the tank or some sort of thing at the back of the tank to make you think the back of the tank was further back than it was, and there could have been, things just hiding back there. And so that was one of the solutions I came up with that. And I was like, that's really clever of him to think about that, because most people wouldn't think about how light is distorted through a hexagonal fish tank. It just wouldn't, most people wouldn't consider that. They're just like, well, how are these fish getting there? And it would be a fooling of the senses. So at a magic show, your senses are fooled. Your senses are relaying one bit of information, that somebody has caught a bullet in their teeth, that there's goldfish appearing out of coins, that Teller has magically appeared behind some object that you didn't even realize was there. All that stuff is obviously not true. When you go to a movie, you see images on the screen that aren't true. There's no fighting robots above you, whether you watch it in 3D or not. You know that that's not true, but the evidence of your senses is that they are true. Your sight and sound is perceiving these things, and because of your ability to understand reality, you know that that your senses are not reporting to you accurate information about reality. If you imagine, you could take somebody who's never, there's always like a cliche in a movie that they bring in like some kid from the Amazon and he sees a movie and he thinks it's real and freaks out. And we're like, haha, that's so funny that he doesn't realize that robots aren't real. It's like we've conditioned ourselves to understand that that's not part of reality. For other people, that may not be the case, and that's what's kind of fun about it. There's other situations where you shouldn't trust the evidence of your senses. If you're utilizing psychoactive drugs, so if you're drinking, or if you're, if you smoke cannabis, or you take some sort of hallucinogen like LSD, your senses are going to be reporting inaccurate information to you pretty much at all the times, especially with like a hallucinogen. If you're eating magic mushrooms, what you see is not real. And you shouldn't consider it real because you know that there's chemicals in there messing with your brain's ability to process your senses and thus making you see different things than what's really there. You shouldn't trust your senses when you're on drugs. There's a really, really good situation. But what about other situations? When should you start to question reality? That's the real question. And I'd like to give you a little exercise to kind of help us think about some of the concepts of when reality should be questioned, how to test reality, and how to be reasonably sure that the reality that you're constructing is the most accurate one. So this is an exercise I do with my students sometimes, and I've done it with a couple of sets of students, and it's always fun because they think outside the box and they come up with solutions that wasn't the way I wanted to direct the conversation, and which is great, So here's a chair. The chair is blue. So I chose blue because all the chairs in my classroom are blue. And so I pull out the chair and be like, tell me what color the chair is. And a lot of them will stop and they won't answer because they're like, oh, Mr. Stewart really likes to fool us with this kind of stuff. He really makes us think about dumb stuff like whether reality is real. So he's like, okay, is the chair blue? I just asked that simple question and they're like, okay, I remember got the answer. It's like, I perceive it to be blue. And it's like, oh, you're already like thinking so well. So is it blue? Yeah, we all see that it's blue. Okay. It's a self-evident proposition. That's another reason that I like it. It's sort of self-evident. Things are either blue because they appear blue, or what other way could they be blue? This is a question of appearance. It's either blue, it's classified within the color realm of blue, or it's not really. So we imagine we have a classroom, 30 students, and they're all like, we all see the blue chair. And in walks the 31st student. He goes, you guys are blind or crazy because the chair's gray. We have a conflicting point of view, and that is a point where we should stop and consider, is the reality we've constructed in our mind, is our mind's understanding of this reality the actual understanding of reality that's accurate? Because, we all have certain deficits in our senses. Some people have to wear glasses. That means you have to alter your senses in order to accurately use them, to actually accurately perceive reality. You put on glasses, things come into clear focus, you can see better. I use a hearing aid, right, because I have a deficit of hearing. That means I can't accurately perceive sound, right? So you're like, so this guy's sitting in a gray chair. Does this mean that we're all crazy and that none of us perceive reality? Well, I mean, the simple, quick, conventional wisdom would be there's 30 people in the room who see a blue chair. There's one dude who sees a gray chair. The one dude who sees a gray chair is either lying or he's colorblind. Like he can't see the chair's color at all. And that's usually good enough for most people. But let's see if we can take it a step further and objectify our perception of the color blue, and see if we can arrive at a reasonable conclusion that we're actually perceiving reality and he's the one that's not. There's three options. Option one is he's lying and he does see a blue chair, but he just wants to lie. And we know that people lie because you've all probably lied in your lives. Not me because I'm perfect. No, we've all probably told lies, and we know that people are capable of relaying information that's not true. That should be a pretty self-evident thing from your experience in life, that people lie. So that's option number one. He's lying. He does see a blue chair, but he just doesn't want to say that. Option number two is that the chair is in fact blue, but he is not perceiving it. So his perception of reality is inaccurate. And option number three is our perception of reality is inaccurate. The chair is in fact gray, but something is going wrong and making us see it as blue. Our senses are failing us somehow. So if you look at option 1, is he lying? Well, we can't get into his head to see if he's lying or not. We can only tell if he's lying by trying to test him. So that's going to be in option 2 or option 3. Option 2, can we test that our perception is accurate? Well, one of the solutions one of my students came up with was, well, I could pull out my phone. I have this app that measures the color of things. So it tells you the concentration of different colors in the RGB spectrum. And you're like, okay. So you get your phone out and you look at it and you're like, oh, it has 5 red, 20 green, 90 blue. It's blue. That means that the greatest concentration of energy and the photons bouncing off the chair is in that energy range that we perceive as blue. Okay. So we've measured it with a scientific device that can measure accurately the energy range of all the photons bouncing off the object. It's blue. That's a really, really great way of externalizing our perception. And that's a really important concept, is being able to externalize and objectify what we see. That means to move the perception away from the subject and into some third neutral realm that everyone can be able to see with equal accuracy, regardless of deficits and regardless of position, or maybe even being there. So if you take a scientific measurement of the photons coming off the chair, you can get an accurate thing. The chair is blue. Now, the third option is this 31st student. Is he seeing a gray chair because he's not perceiving reality right? So we've kind of proved the positive that, like, you know, he's not, you know, we're seeing blue. We're definitely seeing accurately the energy of the photons. So here's this other one. It's not blue, it's gray. A negative is a much more difficult proposition to prove, and you really can only prove a negative by proving positives that are incompatible with whatever other positive that the negative is related to. So if it's like, it's not blue, well, how do you prove that it's not blue? Well, that not blue is wrong. Well, you just prove that it is blue. Or in this case, we're gonna try to prove that his senses are not accurate. So we say, okay, chair's blue, you're seeing gray. I'm going to test the anomaly. So that's a really important thing. We have a bunch of data that lines up and points to one conclusion. We have an anomaly. Let's take a look at that anomaly and see if there's something wrong with the way we measured it, see if there's wrong with perception, see if, you know, there was something wrong with the equipment that explains the anomaly, and if not, we have to go back and figure out a new model that's going to explain the anomaly and whatever theory we're working on. So we pull out a blue object and we go, what color is this? We have a nice shiny blue phone. What color is this object, sir? And the student says, it's gray. You look at it, you're like, well, we all see blue and you see gray. Interesting. So clearly it looks like things that are blue you're perceiving as gray. And then you're like, well, you know, let's test one more thing. Let's find something that's gray. I don't have anything that's gray on hand. So imagine that I'm holding a gray object and you're like, what color is this? And he goes, it's gray. So he sees gray is gray and blue is gray. That should signal to you that he's missing the ability to discern between two different concentrations of energy, right? Or two different arrays of energetic photons entering his eyes, however you want to quantify it. So he's not perceiving that. It's like, can we further test it? And so you create a color blindness test that has like a number 7, and you have like the number 7, and it's in a bunch of dots, and some are blue and some are green and gray, and you hold it up to the guy, and he looks at it and he goes, why did you show me a bunch of dots? And then at that point you realize you can't perceive the color blue. That's why you think it's gray. Is because your senses are not functioning at their full capacity. It's you who needs to stop and consider that the reality you're experiencing of the gray chair is not true, and the chair is in fact blue. And that would lead us back to option 1, because if those little tests of the anomaly, he kept saying, you know, hey, this is blue and the gray is gray, and when I look at the thing, it's a number 7. It's like, then he might be lying, right? But we can't tell for sure. We just know that he's not, when he says something, it doesn't reflect reality. We know he's not telling the truth. Sometimes you can tell the truth and not tell the truth and not be lying, because your perception's wrong. The evidence of your senses are reporting the wrong information to you. So I really like this exercise because it starts with something self-evident, and you get to kind of like test all the different levels of reality there. Now, the person who's colorblind in this example that we've proven to be colorblind, he has a choice, right? His choice is, do I accept the evidence that's being presented to me that's beyond my senses? Or do I persist in saying that my perspective is the true one and it's everybody else that's insane? That's really the choice that he has to make. So really, if you could put yourself in the place of the colorblind person, it's like, what would it take for you to be convinced that you're not perceiving reality? Because the truth is that the evidence of our senses is something that is very, very important and profound, and we shouldn't toss it away lightly. We should toss it away when we have a lot of evidence that tells us to toss it away. And there's lots of ways that we can test our own senses and move information into the realm of our senses. When we did that scientific measurement, we took the concentration of blue and we moved it into a readout that we could understand as humans. You can imagine that if you took an ultraviolet photograph of a flower and you looked at it, you're like, wow, it looks so different. You're taking the visual information that an insect might see and you're moving it via photography and manipulation of the energy levels. You bring those energy levels down to a level where you can see them, and now you're moving them into your senses. Same thing if you're looking through like infrared. Same thing actually if you go on the NASA website and you look at say pictures of nebulae. Nebula don't actually look that way. Nebulae don't actually look the way that you see them on the NASA website, because what they do is the nebula really would look like almost nothing or colorless. And so what they do is they take several different photographs of it in several different wavelengths that they can gather information on. So you take a photograph that's all in one particular wavelength, and I don't know exactly what energy it would be, and you take 3 different measurements, and then you color one of them blue, one of them green, and like one of them red. And so when you overlap them, they're all from the same perspective. All of a sudden you see these beautiful, colorful clouds sort of open up to your eyes, and you're like, this is so beautiful, the wonder of space. But it doesn't actually look that way. It's a composite image that's moving the information from a level that your senses can't perceive it down into a level where your senses can perceive it and better understand it, have a visual understanding of what a nebula looks like in 3 dimensions, or a nebula looks like in 3 dimensions. Likewise, just looking through a telescope is an enhancement of your senses, just like the hearing aid, just like your glasses. The telescope, you look up in the night sky and you're just like, there's stars. You get the telescope out and you see, whoa, stars look different when you get them big. You go out there and you're like, wow, that star's really bright. And you get the telescope and get a really powerful telescope and you're like, whoa, it's Jupiter, it's a planet. It's not a star at all. And it's round and I can see that it's kind of orange. And if you get a big enough telescope, you can see like the moons moving across it. And you're like, well, what's that object? That's a really, really bright object. And you get your telescope out, your really powerful telescope, and you see it's a man-made object. And you're like, it's the space station. There's a space station up there. You can see the space station with your naked eye, by the way. You can go out at night and you can see this really bright, super bright star up there that moves around like almost every day. That's the space station going around the Earth. I usually see it out early evening when I'm out running. I didn't look for it today, actually. But I see it. And you can get a telescope out and you can actually have a better perception of what that looks like by moving this into something big enough that your senses can see the details. So you can move information into the realm of your senses to better understand things. And so that's one way that evidence can overcome the base level of your senses. So your senses, the whole point of this is that your senses are an interface between you and reality. So there's the point of this video. Your senses are an interface between you and reality. You, your mind, your soul, this consciousness that exists within you and permeates you and is you, has to understand reality through your senses, through sight, hearing, touch, taste, smell, time, which you can sense. If you guys have been watching my music theory videos, you can sense time, hot, cold, direction, whether you're up and down, all this sort of stuff. You have a bunch of senses, actually more than 5, and you need them to be able to navigate your environment and know that like there's a wall here, and if I run into it, my body will suffer damage and things like that. It's the interface between you and reality. So you don't want to toss that away willy-nilly. You want to toss it away when there's strong evidence that somehow you've perceived something wrong. That like that bright star in the night sky is not a star leading you to Jesus, but is in fact a space station orbiting the Earth. And when you get the telescope out, you move that information into the realm of your senses. And that's a really important thing about evidence. You may go out to the seashore for you flat Earth types, and you're like, oh, the horizon's flat. I go up if I took you up in a jet and put you in the cockpit, you'd be like, the Earth's round. You'd like see a curvature out there because you change the perspective, and then your senses may be able to perceive it. All the photographs that you have, like, you see a photograph from out the cockpit of a U-2 spy plane, and it's like up in the stratosphere, and you can see the curvature of the Earth like really clearly. Photographs from outside of Earth, you observe the heavenly bodies, all these sorts of things that are moved from one perspective into another. A photograph is a much more objective way of capturing that moment than our own senses are. That leads me back to the Mandela effect with memory, is that memory is a memory of your senses usually. And we know that your senses can't be trusted, and so therefore your memory can't always be trusted. And then if we find out that your memory doesn't accurately record the information from your senses, it reconstructs the information when you access the memory. So you actually need to trust your memory because your memory contains most of the things that are important, but you should cease to trust it when there's overwhelming evidence that your memory doesn't match the reality that's out there, the external reality. And you can do that by objectivizing it. And it's really important to take that information and sort of externalize it so that anyone can see through their interface of senses that a certain thing is true because it's not individualized to you. And you don't have to have that first option from those three options, which is he lying? That's why we want to objectivize it. It's because there's no question, is he lying? Is he misperceiving? That it's not a question of perception. It's not a question of lying. We have it outside of ourselves so that anyone can see it. We take a picture so that we don't have to remember it, so that it's there. We write it down so we don't have to remember it, so it's there later when we need it. And so that's really all I have to say about that. Thank you for joining me on that. Trust the evidence of your senses, and only stop to not trust it when you have evidence that is superior to your senses, that lets you know that there's some flaw in the way that you are perceiving reality. And it usually has to be fairly substantial. Think about having to be convinced that you're colorblind. If you happen to be colorblind, it usually becomes kind of obvious after a while that you can't perceive the same colors as other people. Likewise, I don't need a whole lot of people to tell me that I'm deaf. I can't hear things in that ear. I can't hear them. I do this. I can't hear nothing if I don't have the hearing aid on. In fact, right now this is really loud because this thing works really good. But other times, if I have that off, it's like I can't hear nothing. So just think about it like that. And I appreciate, of course, the journey. I appreciate you having fun with me and the conversations. Please leave me your comments down below. Let me know what you want to see and what you want to hear. If you want to support me, consider buying a book. I have a 99-cent option on Amazon. I have 2 of them, actually. So if you only want to give me $1, you can buy a book, and then you get something from it. If you buy, of course, a physical copy of like Muramasa, if you don't like it, you can always give it to someone else. And then you've been like, well, I bought the book from the guy, and it wasn't for me. But, James liked it. He likes samurais and blood. So yay for James. And you guys have a great, great day. I will see you next time.